The jungle planet of Caveros was notorious for its brutal wildlife, teeming with creatures that no one dared approach without heavy armor and advanced weaponry. Only the boldest or most foolish would step foot on it voluntarily. Yet, as the dropship pierced the thick canopy, its thrusters kicking up swirls of dust and foliage, Lieutenant Cade Morrison had one thought. Why me? The mission briefing had been vague in emergency extraction on Caveros, but now that Cade was here, seeing the hostile landscape, he wondered why in the galaxy they'd sent a human to this death trap of a planet. Caveros was a Class E world, barely colonized because of the extreme dangers that lurked beneath its alien jungles. But more than anything, Caveros was home to one thing that gave even the bravest adventurers pause: the apex predators known as Krylos. Massive creatures, the Krylos were feared across the sector, all fangs, claws, and pure aggression. They stood nearly 10 feet tall, with armored plates across their bodies and a reputation for tearing apart anyone foolish enough to wander into their territory. The only thing more terrifying than seeing one up close was the idea of seeing one wounded, cornered, and furious. The dropship's hatch hissed open, the scent of damp foliage and distant rot hitting Cade in the face. He stepped out, his boots sinking slightly into the wet, spongy earth. Surrounding him were towering trees with thick, black vines curling around them like snakes. Insects the size of his fist buzzed near his helmet, their iridescent wings humming. The air was humid, heavy, as if the planet itself was trying to crush him under its weight. "Stay sharp," Cade muttered to himself, adjusting the strap of his medkit. His role on this mission wasn't to fight, it was to patch someone up. The higher-ups had called for a field medic, and he was the one they sent. The extraction team had vanished from the comms 3 hours ago, and all that had come through was a garbled message: apex predator. Wounded. Need immediate assistance. As Cade moved deeper into the jungle, the thick foliage around him grew more menacing. The trees were ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, covered in layers of moss and strange alien fungi that glowed faintly. The light barely reached through the canopy, casting the world in eerie shadows. The jungle seemed alive, with every rustle in the underbrush or flutter of wings making Cade grip his pulse rifle tighter. Caveros was infamous for more than just the Krylos. Lesser predators stalked the jungle as well, creatures that would test their strength and cunning against anything unfamiliar. Cade could feel them, lurking in the shadows, watching him. He tapped his scanner, sending out a pulse to check for movement, but the screen only flickered, failing to make sense of the chaotic biosphere. The weight of the silence pressed down on him, broken only by the hum of the ship's thrusters as it ascended behind him, leaving him alone in the wilderness. His heart pounded, a steady drum in his chest, and sweat trickled down his neck, mixing with the moisture in the air. Then, the comm crackled to life. Lieutenant Morrison, a strained voice cut through the static, heavy with tension. "Do you copy?" Cade grabbed the comm on his shoulder. "Morrison here. I'm en route to the last known coordinates. What's your status?" "We're pinned," the voice replied, strained. "It's worse than we thought. Apex predators wounded. But there's something else." The signal cut off, leaving only static. "Something else?" Cade's stomach dropped. If the Krylos was hurt, then the situation was already bad. But another threat on top of that? He needed to move fast. He pressed forward, making his way through the undergrowth as quickly as he could. The jungle was thick and oppressive, the air humid and difficult to breathe. Sweat soaked his uniform as he pushed aside giant ferns and stepped over gnarled roots that threatened to trip him at every turn. His boots squelched with every step as the soft, mossy ground gave way beneath him. Suddenly, a movement in the bushes to his left caught his eye. Cade froze, pulse rifle raised, his heart pounding in his ears. Something was out there. He could hear the soft rustle of leaves, the faint snarl of a predator. A low growl echoed from the darkness. Cade's breath caught. He glanced at his scanner, but it was no use. The interference from the thick jungle canopy distorted any readings. He was on his own. Slowly he backed away from the sound, his eyes scanning the trees, looking for any sign of movement. There, a shadow moved between the trees, too quick to make out, but large enough to make Cade's pulse spike. He turned to face it, but the jungle closed in around him, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Another growl, closer this time. Cade's hand tightened on the trigger of his rifle. He needed to keep moving. Standing still was a death sentence here. With every step, his body tensed, ready to bolt or fight. The foliage around him was alive with movement now, the predators tracking him from a distance, waiting for an opportunity. He stepped into a small clearing, his pulse rifle sweeping from side to side, scanning for threats. For a moment the jungle was silent again, the only sound the rapid beating of his heart. Then it exploded. From the trees, 3 creatures leaped at once low to the ground and fast. Cade barely had time to register them before they were on him. They looked like massive, armored wolves, their sleek bodies covered in black carapace, teeth glinting under the faint light that filtered through the canopy. Instinct took over. Cade dropped to one knee, firing a burst from his pulse rifle. The energy blast struck the first wolf-like creature mid-leap, sending it crashing to the ground in a smoking heap. But the other 2 were relentless, flanking him from both sides, their growls vibrating through his chest. Cade rolled to the side as one of them lunged, its jaws snapping shut where he had just been standing. He fired again, the pulse blast searing a hole through the creature's side, but it kept coming, undeterred by the injury. The second wolf closed in from behind, forcing Cade to pivot and fire another shot, the blast grazing its armored hide. He didn't have time to finish either of them off. In a desperate move, Cade pulled a small EMP grenade from his belt and hurled it into the middle of the pack. The device detonated with a crackle of energy, sending a shockwave that momentarily disoriented the creatures. That was all he needed. Cade dashed forward, diving past the wolves as they staggered, using the moment to put some distance between himself and the predators. He didn't stop running until he was sure he had lost them, his chest heaving as he leaned against a tree, gasping for breath. The jungle around him was quiet again, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. Cade wiped the sweat from his brow, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He glanced down at his scanner. It had picked up something in the chaos, a faint signal up ahead, stronger than before. The Krylos. He pressed on, this time more cautiously. Every step was deliberate, every noise analyzed. He wasn't just worried about the Krylos anymore. If there were predators like that hunting this jungle, there could be more waiting in ambush. He couldn't afford another surprise attack. But as he moved closer to the signal, Cade's thoughts drifted to the voice on the comm. Pinned. Was the extraction team still alive? If they were, why had the signal gone dead? He was about to find out. The trees parted up ahead, revealing a wide clearing, and there, in the center of it, was the source of the signal, the Krylos. But it wasn't alone. The massive creature lay in a crude pit dug into the ground, surrounded by dark, thick jungle. Its hulking form was easily twice the size of Cade's dropship, its dark, leathery skin covered in patches of blood and mud. Its body was lined with jagged, armored plates that were cracked in several places, and one of its legs was caught in a tangle of thick, metal wires, a trap. Whoever had set it had known what they were doing. The Krylos' chest heaved with labored breaths, and its eyes, normally bright with a predatory gleam, were dim and unfocused. The beast's massive form trembled, muscles twitching in spasms of pain. The air around it smelled of blood and fear. Cade's heart pounded in his chest as he stood at the edge of the clearing, scanning the area for any signs of the extraction team. But there was no one, just the wounded predator, trapped and alone. He knelt beside the beast, his mind racing. The trap wasn't just meant to hold it, it was killing it. Poison? Maybe. He needed to act fast if he was going to save the Krylos and figure out what had gone wrong with the team. But as Cade reached for his medkit, a voice cut through the clearing. Low, gravelly, and dripping with malice.
Well, look what we have here.
Cade froze, turning to see a group of figures stepping out from the shadows of the jungle, their eyes gleaming with cold, predatory intent. Just when we thought the hunt was over. 3 humanoids, reptilian and armored in makeshift gear, circled him. Their leader, a tall figure with a jagged scar running across his scaled face, grinned, baring sharp, serrated teeth. Cade's pulse quickened. These weren't just hunters, they were poachers. And judging by the way they eyed both him and the Krylos, this was far from over. Back away from the beast, Human the leader hissed, leveling a sleek, lethal-looking energy rifle at Cade's chest. Before we add you to the trophies. Cade's fingers twitched near his pulse rifle, but he didn't move. 3 poachers, all armed, were bad enough. But with the wounded Krylos behind him, he was caught between a rock and a very large, very dangerous place. The lead poacher's cold eyes narrowed. You're in the way, human. This beast is worth more than your life. Worth enough to risk getting killed over. Cade shot back, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his gut. The poacher chuckled darkly, his companions shifting closer, rifles raised and ready. That's the thing about hunters, Morrison, the leader said, his voice suddenly silky. We know when to strike, when to bleed, and when to skin. How do you know my name? Cade's voice hardened, his grip tightening on his rifle. Who do you think sent the distress signal? The poacher grinned, baring sharp, serrated teeth. We needed a medic to keep our prize alive. Cade's heart skipped. The whole mission had been a trap luring him in, thinking he was coming to rescue some stranded team. And now they were using him to keep the Krylos alive long enough to claim it as a trophy. He glanced at the beast behind him. Its breathing was labored, its immense body trembling with pain. The metal wires from the trap were laced with neurotoxin, poisoning the predator's blood. If Cade didn't act soon, the Krylos would die, and the poachers would claim their prize, leaving Cade either dead or worse. A flicker of anger flashed in Cade's chest. He wasn't about to let this creature die, or let himself be used by these scum. He had faced tougher odds before, and Kiveros wasn't going to be his grave. So what now? Cade asked, slowly backing toward the Krylos, his mind already working out the next move. You want me to keep it alive so you can mount its head on your wall? The leader's grin widened. Exactly. You patch it up, and maybe we let you walk away. After all, you're just a medic. No need to get heroic. Cade's jaw clenched. He needed to buy time. His eyes flicked to the ground, searching for anything, any advantage. The Krylos groaned behind him, a deep, rumbling sound that vibrated through the earth. It was weak, but not dead yet. If Cade could remove the trap, maybe. All right, Cade said, holding up his free hand in surrender. I'll help. But it needs immediate treatment. The neurotoxin is spreading too fast. You kill me now, and it dies. Then your prize is worthless. The poachers exchanged glances, their leader frowning. Cade knew they didn't want the Krylos dying on them, not when they had spent who knew how long setting this up. The leader growled, lowering his weapon slightly. Fine, do what you need to do. But no funny business, human, or we gut you and leave you for the scavengers. Cade nodded, slowly stepping back to the Krylos. The creature's yellow eyes flickered open, its gaze locking onto Cade's for a brief moment. There was pain there, but also something else. Understanding? Trust? Cade couldn't be sure. He knelt beside the Krylos' massive leg, examining the metal trap. The wires were dug deep into its flesh, and the neurotoxin had spread, causing spasms in the surrounding muscles. Cade's medkit beeped softly, the auto-injector ready. His mind raced as he worked, applying the antidote to the neurotoxin and assessing the damage. He needed to free the Krylos, but the poachers were watching him too closely. One wrong move, and they'd fire. Cade glanced at his plasma cutter, still attached to his belt. If he could just get it close enough to cut the wires without drawing attention. Need to remove the trap now, Cade muttered, not bothering to look at the poachers. It's killing it. Quickly. The leader stepped closer, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. No tricks. No tricks, Cade echoed, pulling out the plasma cutter. He activated it with a low hum, keeping his movements steady and deliberate. He began cutting through the metal, his pulse racing as the Krylos twitched under his touch. The poachers were watching him like hawks. As Cade cut through the second wire, the Krylos stirred, its massive muscles flexing. Cade felt the shift in the air, a ripple of energy, as the creature's body reacted to the relief of pain. It wouldn't be long before the beast regained enough strength to fight. Good. Cade's mind raced, calculating the next move. He was outgunned, but the Krylos was his wild card. If he timed it right, he could turn the tide. The third wire snapped, and the Krylos groaned, its claws scraping the dirt. Cade stepped back, his pulse hammering in his ears. The creature was almost free. One more cut, and it would be loose. Almost done, Cade said aloud, his hand hovering over the last wire. The leader of the poachers leaned in, his face twisted with impatience. Hurry up, human. We don't have all day. Cade's eyes flicked to the plasma cutter, then to the Krylos leg. One last move. He had to make it count. In a flash, Cade slashed the plasma cutter upward, severing the final wire and he spun, hurling the still glowing cutter directly at the nearest poacher. The tool hit the alien in the chest, burning through his armor and sending him sprawling with a scream. The second poacher barely had time to react before Cade whipped around and fired his pulse rifle in quick succession. 2 shots, center mass. The alien dropped like a stone. The leader roared, raising his weapon, but it was too late. With a deafening roar, the Krylos surged to its feet, tearing free from the trap. The massive creature's claws raked through the air, catching the poacher in a single, lethal swipe. Blood sprayed across the clearing as the Krylos slammed him to the ground, pinning him with its massive claw. Cade scrambled back, pulse racing as the Krylos roared again, its yellow eyes blazing with fury. The last poacher was crushed beneath its weight, his weapon clattering uselessly to the ground. The jungle fell silent once more, the only sound the Krylos' heavy, labored breathing. Cade didn't move. His pulse rifle was still raised, but he knew it wouldn't help him if the Krylos decided to turn on him now. The beast's chest heaved, its claws flexing in the dirt as it towered over the bodies of the poachers. For a long moment, Cade and the Krylos simply stared at one another. The creature's yellow eyes were still burning with intensity, but there was no aggression there. Not toward him, at least. Slowly, cautiously, Cade lowered his rifle. He took a step back, giving the creature space, watching its reaction. The Krylos snorted, its massive head lowering slightly as it shifted its weight. The creature was still hurt, deep gashes and cracks in its armor plating, but it was no longer dying. The antidote had worked, and with the trap removed, the Krylos could heal. "You're free now," Cade whispered, unsure why he was even speaking. Maybe it was the adrenaline, or maybe it was the surreal nature of the situation. Here he was, standing face to face with one of the most dangerous predators in the galaxy, and he had just saved its life. The Krylos rumbled low in its throat, a sound that vibrated through Cade's bones. It was almost a purr. With a final glance at Cade, the Krylos turned and lumbered off into the jungle, its massive form disappearing into the shadows. The ground shook slightly beneath its weight as it vanished from sight, leaving Cade standing alone in the clearing. For a long moment, Cade just stood there, catching his breath. The adrenaline was still coursing through his veins, but the danger had passed. He glanced down at the bodies of the poachers, their weapons scattered and useless. The jungle around him was still, the oppressive weight of the atmosphere returning now that the chaos had subsided. Cade wiped the sweat from his brow, his heart finally slowing to a more manageable pace. He had survived. Barely. But he had survived. And more than that, he had saved the Krylos. Cade glanced at the wreckage of the poachers' equipment, thinking about the report he would have to file